This is Mr. Martin. These are video notes for Precalculus Honors. We're talking still about section 8.6, and we're going to get into 8.7. So let's look at some terminology associated with probability. And the first thing we want to look at is what is an experiment. So an experiment is a process or study where a result is unknown and may vary. So flipping a coin, rolling a die, picking numbers out of a hat, things like that. And then we're going to talk a lot about a sample space. So a sample space is all the possible outcomes in an experiment. So again, if we're flipping a coin, our sample space would either be heads or tails. Now when we start to flip two coins, we're going to have a different sample space because we're going to have two parts to our outcomes. If we're rolling a die, the sample space would be the numbers 1 through 6. Okay, so moving on to an event. An event is a subset of the sample space. So, for example, the way to get a sum of 4 when rolling 2 die. Alright, so that would be a subset of the sample space. The sample space would be all the possible outcomes. An event would just be a subset of that. Alright, probability is simply the likelihood of an event occurring. And sometimes we call this odds, the odds of something happening. Alright, so now that we have some of that terminology out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. Again, it's important that you know what the vocabulary or the terminology means so that you know how to answer the questions. So for number 1, it says we have 100 marbles are placed in a bag, 50 red, 30 blue, 10 yellow, 10 green. An experiment consists of drawing one marble out of the bag and observing the color. So we want to know the sample space. The sample space are all the different possible outcomes. So our sample space, it could either be red or blue or yellow or green. We know that there are 4 possible outcomes, but the sample space lists what the outcomes actually are. Alright, and then for part B, we want to write out a reasonable probability distribution for this experiment and verify that the sum of the probabilities of the outcomes equals 1. So let's do a chart here. We're going to do color, and we're going to do probability. And we've got red, blue, yellow, and lastly we have green. And for our red balls, since we have 50 of them, the probability of picking a red one is going to be 50 out of 100. And we have 30 of the blue color, so that would be 30 out of 100 would be the probability of picking a blue one. Yellow would be 10 out of 100. And green would also be 10 out of 100. So sometimes we'll want these as fractions, sometimes we'll want them as decimals. So for the red we have 0.5, 0.3 for blue, the yellow we have 0.1, and the green we also have 0.1. And if we add up these probabilities, we get 1. So we've verified that the sum of the probabilities of the outcomes is 1. So there's our probability distribution. Now we can use this to find a probability. What is the probability that a blue or a green marble will be drawn? So the probability of blue or, this is the key word, green. So we looked at some things before where we had something and something else happening, and we multiplied those answers together. For here with an or, we're going to add. These are two separate events. So the probability of blue is 30 out of 100, and the probability of green is 10 out of 100, which gives us 40 out of 100, or 2/5, or if you like it as a decimal, 0.4. So that would be the probability that we picked a blue or a green. Alright, so what we just did in example 1 is determine the probability of some events occurring. So just to formalize things here, the probability of an event can be defined as the following. Suppose an experiment has a sample space of n outcomes, all of which are equally likely. Then the probability of each outcome is 1 out of n, and the probability of an event E is given by the number of outcomes in E out of the total number of outcomes n. So let's take a look at an experiment consisting of rolling a 6-sided die. And what does it mean for all the outcomes to be equally likely? That means that each outcome has the same chance of occurring. Alright, so we want to write a probability distribution for the experiment. So we've got numbers, we've got the probability. We're going to have the numbers 1 through 6. 6. And the probability of each number occurring would be 1 out of 6. 1 out of 6 for each of these. They're all equally likely to occur. And now we can find the probability of the event that an even number is rolled. So really what we're looking for is the probability of an even number, or we could think of this as the probability of getting a 2 or a 4 or a 6. So the probability of getting a 2 is 1/6, a 4 is 1/6, and a 6 is 1/6. So that gives us 3/6 or a half. So we have 1 out of 2 probability. Half the time we're going to get an even number according to our probabilities. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here, and if you had any questions, make sure that you ask. If you need to rewind or rewatch, feel free to do that, and we will see you in the next video.